My advice to you is to buy a tombstone before you die. Get your money's worth. You can't enjoy it when you're dead. It might seem more compelling to spend your money on paying bills, or maybe on a car, but these things come and go. A gravestone is for life. But not all gravestones are equal. Some are just mysterious. In a small town stands a mysterious double gravestone. It belongs to the two wives of Dr. Samuel Bean, who both died young. This was not unusual for the mid-19th century. The unusual part was the inscription on its surface. It was clearly some kind of coded message, but the doctor refused to reveal its meaning, and then he died, going down with a ship bound for Cuba. Word of this mystery gradually spread across America, bringing countless people to see it for themselves. For decades they tried to solve it, often spending years of their life attempting to decode the message. Many claimed to have solved it, but it was only in the 1970s when it was truly solved by a 94-year-old woman. According to her, the message reads, "In memoriam Henrietta, first wife of S. Bean, who died 27th September 1865, aged 23, and Susanna, his second wife, who died 27th April 1867, aged 26. Two better wives one man never had. They were gifts from God, but are now in heaven." Now that's quite a sweet message, but considering it took over 100 years to decode, it's not great. People wasted their lives trying to decode an essentially boring message. In 1700s England, there was a man called Richard Smith. He was a young and playful lad, and that caused his death. One day an army recruiter came to town, loudly encouraging members of the public to join the military. But Richard Smith wasn't having it. He started making jokes at the army recruiter's expense. The recruiter wasn't pleased by this, so he murdered Richard Smith. He literally murdered the guy in front of everyone. And that's not even the strangest part. In the years following Smith's death, people began claiming to see a mysterious red liquid seeping from his grave, as if the headstone was sweating blood. Generations of people reported seeing the gravestone bleed, and still today there's no clear explanation. The US state of Pennsylvania is home to many mysteries. I would usually insert a joke here, but right now I don't care enough. It's a lazy day. Across the state can be found countless blank headstones, and no one knows why. Despite often being elaborate and grand, they have no inscription. In fact, they are completely smooth, as if they never had one at all. They were clearly the work of master stone masons, but we don't even know who they were, let alone why they did this. Some believe they had a painted inscription, instead of it being carved into the stone. This would explain them being blank all these years later, but without evidence this theory is pure speculation. In 1794, a man called James Leeson passed away. Little is known about him on a personal level, but like every creepy weirdo of that time, he was a Freemason. On his tombstone are to be found various carvings, a winged hourglass and flaming urn, each representing aspects of mortality, and Masonic tools. These were common symbols of the era. The strange part is the inscription above them. It looks like some kind of alien language, or maybe an ancient, long-forgotten writing system. In reality, it was the Masonic Language, a secretive tongue known only to Freemasons. At the time, few understood the language, and it was so complex they needed a cipher to translate it. It was 100 years before the mysterious inscription was revealed to the public, thanks to more people learning the Masonic language. The inscription is a simple message. It reads, "Remember death," a warning to fellow Masons that their time will also run out. In the small American town of Bucksport, you will find the grave of its founder, Jonathan Buck. He was not only a military officer but a judge, who according to legend sentenced a witch to death. As a suspected witch, she was burnt at the stake. The fire was set small to avoid her dying quickly of smoke. As the fire burned through her legs, she put a curse on him. The curse caused his death soon after, and continued to affect his remains even after that. It is said that bad luck will follow any man to even visit his grave. In the 1800s, a large monument was erected at his grave. In time, a stain appeared on it in the shape of a leg. No matter how many times the stain was cleaned away, it would always reappear in the exact same shape. In 1895, a man called George Argo fell to his death. He was an experienced miner who fell 200 feet into a disused shaft. The death alone was mysterious. Argo had been working those mines for decades. He would have known exactly where each mine shaft was, yet he accidentally fell to his death. Something wasn't right. Over 1,000 confused locals came to his funeral, and an obelisk was erected in his honor. That should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. In the years that followed, people began claiming to see the obelisk glowing brightly. On certain dark nights, the obelisk would emit a brief but strong light, before fading with no explanation. There was no pattern, as if the nights had been chosen at random, and no one could work out what it meant. Generations of locals claimed to witness the glow, but it grew weaker as time went on, and one day the obelisk stopped glowing at all. A while ago, tombstones began to wash up on beaches near San Francisco. Many were fully intact, despite often being over 100 years old. For some time, locals had no idea why this was happening. It was like they were in a Stephen King story. If gravestones started washing up where I live, I'd be alarmed too. I'd try to burn the whole city down, but it turns out there's an only slightly disturbing explanation. In the 1920s and 30s, local authorities decided to move most cemeteries outside of San Francisco. Countless dead bodies were literally dug up and taken away, but for some reason their gravestones were not taken with them. Instead, the stones were used for construction projects, because apparently people back then were just begging to be haunted. Many tombstones were used to shore up a seawall just off the coast. As the decades of tidal battering went by, tombstones began to be knocked loose, washing up on local beaches. 3 years ago, an ancient Roman tombstone was found buried in New York. The discovery immediately caused confusion. Rome's empire was vast, but it didn't reach North America. So how did this 2,000-year-old gravestone end up here? It turns out the stone belonged to a tax collector called Tiberius Saturnius. The gravestone was discovered in a suburb of New York that in the Gilded Age was known for its super-rich residents. It was referred to as Millionaire's Row because there were so many mansions. So apparently one of those super-rich people bought the gravestone while in Italy and then shipped it back to New York. After that, they must have buried it for some reason. In 1832, a man called John Rennie died. He led a fairly unnoteworthy life, but in death became well known thanks to his very noteworthy grave. On his headstone was a large inscription. At first glance, it looks like a big word search, clearly containing words like here, lies, and John. But the words are jumbled in such a strange combination no one could understand it. Almost 200 years later, the inscription has been fully analysed. It turns out you're meant to start with the H in the centre and work outwards to spell the sentence, here lies John Rennie. By moving in different directions, you can find many ways to spell it. In fact, there are 46,000 combinations, all to spell out the exact same sentence. Not bad for some random bloke's gravestone. One of America's earliest insane asylum was the Lunatic Asylum of Ohio. Like other 19th century asylums, its notoriety spread far and wide. One of its doctors claimed to have a 100% success rate in curing patients. According to rumour, he would remove parts of their brain until they seemed less mentally ill, and when that didn't work, he would murder them. That's how you get a 100% cure rate. Apparently. We can't say for sure. In 1868, the asylum burnt down, destroying many of its official documents. But the Asylum Cemetery survived, and it's a very creepy place. Many of the corpses there are unidentified, with grave markers either being numbered or just left blank. Some gravestones simply read specimens. It's unclear who or what is buried below them. Perhaps the Mad Doctor's victims, or even fragments of removed brain. We may never know.